My big takeaway from this game, and I want yours, of course, as well in a minute, is that Penn State loses Drew Aller to an injury, a lower body injury, in the second quarter. And there's really no drop off. Pribula, if that's how you pronounce his name, I'm not entirely sure, goes 11 of 13 for just 98 yards and average yards per attempt of 7.5. Not anything, Heisman worthy or anything, obviously. But throws for a touchdown, no turnovers, no picks, an 85 ESPN QBR, which, by the way, is better than what Braden Locke did in this game with a terrible interception that led to a Penn State touchdown. And Penn State pulls this one out despite losing their quarterback and despite losing Donnie Dennis Sutton, one of their best defensive players as well, to injury. Their last 4 drives with Pribula in the game, punt, 13 plays, 81 yards, touchdown, 9 plays, 76 yards, touchdown. They score on 50% of their drives with their backup quarterback. And I'm curious to get your takeaways on this game and really Penn State at large. And maybe we can kind of cycle this into a Penn State versus Ohio State preview for this next coming weekend too.
Yeah, so I am also impressed with Penn State. So I have a kind of a narrative about James Franklin. Well, although it's not just me, a lot of people have a James Franklin narrative. Heck, the mainstream media has a James Franklin narrative, right, about him not being able to beat Michigan and Ohio State, especially the latter, right? And before, and I know this is a little off topic, but the Oregon Ohio State game, I was calling Dan Lanning Diet James Franklin before that game. And in actuality, the real Diet James Franklin is Ryan Day. We saw his record against top 5 teams, his record obviously against Michigan, and there's some other tiers to that record, but he's been exceptional in games that don't necessarily move the needle, but against the teams like in Oregon, like Michigan the last 3 years, like Georgia, those games are the ones that he's losing. And this game sets up to be the same, except he's playing against the actual James Franklin, who has this same thing against him and his teams, or Ohio State, just period. And it leaves me in a bit of a conundrum here, because on one hand, do I think Penn State has played well enough this year to compete with anybody in the Big Ten? Yes. Do I think Penn State has played well enough to beat anybody? Yes. However, even at home against Ohio State, which they will be, this game is at home for Penn State, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Big noon kickoff robbed us of a night game, by the way.
Yeah. Which they have done now the last 2 seasons, and I thank them for it last season against Michigan. And I'm sure fans of Ohio State are thanking them again.
Mm-hmm.
But
the football gods doing things in Ohio State's favor? Never.
Absolutely, right? If I'm previewing this game, it's going to come down, obviously, the health of Drew Aller. I don't know if he's going to be out for this game. I didn't look into that before this, unfortunately. Also,
unfortunately, Penn State, like Michigan, is very cryptic with their
cryptic, right?
Too, so it's hard.
Michigan's famous line since Jim Harbaugh is working through some things. Right? Yep. What is that exactly? But anyway,
and then you find out he broke his tibula.
Exactly, right?
That's not working
through some things. He's out for the season.
I saw him walk into the facility with a cast on his leg.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's working through some things. Yeah.
But the Ohio State offensive line, I think, is another key to this game. If Penn State can get pressure on the quarterback, if Penn State can corral these running backs in the way that Nebraska was able to do, they're going to give themselves a chance. My only fear is that this game is a 1-score game, and in that situation, I have to favor Ohio State because James Franklin hasn't shown me in those situations that he can beat them. I also sort of expect JTT to have a big game. His scholastic career has been made off the back of one very, very fine game against Penn State. And maybe he, every other year he's good against them. I don't know.
He
Uh,
switches bodies with Ohio State,
exactly
Chase Young
right.
before. That's some, like, Freaky
Yeah,
Friday stuff.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
If you want me to give a winner, I'm going to say Ohio State at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Allow me to try to first of all, we have some breaking news, and it's Michigan related. I don't know if you've seen it pop up.
Okay.
I just had to look on my phone. Somebody chimed in. D. Cormillan chimed in the comments, and I had to verify it myself. I'm
Is this
seeing it on
real?
Facebook right
That's
now.
my guy DK. Yeah.
According to Michigan Diehards, which is a Facebook page I follow, it is true. There's an official statement out. Jack Tuttle is retiring from college football after
Wow.
7 long years, nearly an entire presidency if you serve 2 terms.
Right.
But just wanted to
This
get
is
that out there. Yeah, wild.
yeah, that's pretty wild. That's interesting, man. Literally has been around a long time. This is interesting.
Yeah, 7 years and now
Is there an injury related or
I got it pulled up on my phone, and it's a really long statement that I would
okay,
have
all
to
right.
sit
Yeah,
here
yeah.
and
We
zoom
don't
in
need
and
to go
my
through
eyes
that.
like a boomer. I don't wanna do that on stream, but yeah, that is, breaking news for everybody out there.
He did us a
Jack
favor.
Tuttle.
That's
After a
that's rough.
long and storied and illustrious career, may we never forget that interception against Washington.
Oh yeah. Great.
But just
I think he's like even money on touchdowns and interceptions, right?
oh, yeah,
7
pretty much.
touchdowns, 7 interceptions in his career. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
But just to get back into this, previewing this Ohio State Penn State game, maybe we'll kind of end up finishing off on this one because I know you're limited on time. And appreciate you again coming on here.
No, no, I
Um,
appreciate you inviting me.
I couldn't do it without my guests, honestly. I did a couple by myself, and I was like, I need to start bringing guests on. But anyway, I want to try to kind of persuade you a second because I know there's I call it the James Franklin heuristic. It's the common, consensus that he can't win big games. Like you said, this is a matchup kind of similar in a way to what
Mhm.
we saw with Ohio State and Oregon in terms of those kind of narratives earlier this season, where Ohio State had to go on the road to a coach who has also because Dan Lanning, like before this season, wasn't beating his rivals,
Right.
wasn't winning top 5 games. People were wondering if he was really the answer at Oregon. And James Franklin has been at Penn State forever now. Speaking of Jack Tuttle, he's one of the few college football head coaches that had been coaching before Jack Tuttle entered college football. So it's a longer history with James Franklin, I feel like. But I feel like, and I'm going to shout out college football with Sam again because he made a really great point when we were kind of looked ahead at this game a couple weeks ago too. He said James Franklin is a really coordinator dependent coach.
Mhm.
And I think that might be all the difference for them in this game because I think for the first time in a while, schematically, I look at Ohio State's offense and I look at Penn State's defense, and then I look at Penn State's offense and I look at Ohio State's defense. And for the first time in a while, in terms of like metagame stuff, Penn State might be a little bit ahead and they might
Mhm.
have the advantage. And Kotelnicki is, I mean, that man is a genius. Like, I love how he dialed up. My hot take for Michigan in the offseason is they should have hired Kotelnicki and
Yeah.
Campbell out of town, but that's
Right.
for another time and place. But I just schematically and even talent wise, Penn State has some dudes, and Singleton is back and had a decent game against Wisconsin. That two-headed monster is still there. I don't know what Ohio State does to defend Tyler Warren. In Ohio State, you mentioned Denzel Burke not being able to cover anybody. They had to shuffle around their defensive backfield, and they had to put former linebackers at safety and vice versa, I think is
Yep.
part of what they did. Sonny Styles moved over.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're going to do about Tyler Warren. Their run defense is still really good, but Penn State's run offense is very good and very
Yeah.
multiple. Penn State in the trenches, I think, wins. I think we can agree. Penn State's defensive line against Ohio State's offensive line will be very interesting.
Yep.
If Penn State has Donnie Dennis Sutton, they have the guy in the middle as well, Zane Durant, who I don't think gets enough attention for the pass rushing defensive tackle he is. Yeah, if I was to strip the logos off the helmets, and I know Penn State doesn't have one to begin with, they have a very boring helmet aesthetic. Shout out to Bryce and Garrison on Scarlet and Blue Show, two former South
Right.
Christians who wear the same helmet.
Yeah.
But if I was to strip logos off helmets and uniforms and just like look at these two teams on paper without knowing who they were, I would say that Penn State can win this game. I don't know if I did much persuading you there, but that's just how I.
No, because I feel the same. I feel like Penn State can win. It really comes down to, and it is a narrative, right? And narratives, things happen, and it can change overnight, right? He could come out there Saturday and change everything that's been said, right? With a win, Jim Harbaugh certainly did, right, in 2021.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh did it.
Yeah, so it's not that it's an impossibility. I don't believe it's an impossibility. In fact, I think it's likely to a certain degree. Um, However, if you held my feet to the fire today, like right now at this moment, and you did a great job of explaining why they can and probably will win, and I believe that their defensive line versus the offensive line of Ohio State is a check in the box for Penn State. Um, but until he does it, it's kind of like that. Um, it's kind of like I need to see him do it first, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and he's an excellent coach, and I think he sometimes is ridiculed too much for his lack of winning against Ohio State and even Michigan over the years here. But I think he's a really good football coach, and this sort of win will put him in, a different tier even, but he has to do it. And if he doesn't do it this year, I think it's going to be people calling for his job, which is crazy even, but may have some merit to it too. Right now, I think Ohio State wins that game though, unfortunately.
And I mean, yeah, you mentioned the narratives and stuff, and the thing too, ultimately, is narratives exist for a reason, right?
Right.
Like this is a man, to your point, that doesn't have a track record himself of winning the big games, especially against this team. And maybe there are things. Look, I'm a psychology major. Maybe maybe there is a mental block there. Maybe there is something that causes him to make. We've seen it in years past. Speaking of, in like 2022, when
Yeah.
JTT was going off, for him to make rash decisions in games. And we just kind of see that generally with James, by the way. My big
Yeah.
hot take on James Franklin is he managed to be the weirdest head coach in the Big Ten while Jim Harbaugh was in the Big Ten, which was really saying something. Uh,
Right.
but it'll be an interesting game for sure. I think it could be another Oregon Ohio State where it comes down to the wire because Penn
Yeah.
State's for real. Penn State is a good. There's a reason why they're up there in all those key metrics. They are eighth right now in FSP plus overall. They're a good team. They are a
Yeah.
good team. Very good
I
team.
agree.